Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Becky Schilling. It's great to have you with us for today's eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host amazing guests from all areas of media, ad tech, and martech. Today, we're discussing the findings from a TripleLift survey executed by eMarketer, highlighting the strategic moves advertisers are making to enhance their off-site ad efforts. With that said, let me introduce our guests. Bob Kuhn, Senior Vice President, U.S. Sales with TripleLift. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Becky. Thanks for having me.
And Mark Menino, Chief Marketplace Officer at Flywheel. Hi, Mark.
How you doing, Becky?
Great, thank you. Before we get into it, to our audience, let's keep it conversational. Just use the chat window on the right to tell us where you're joining us from and to submit your questions. We'll do our best to get to as many of your live questions as we can during our Q&A, so keep them coming. We have a great discussion planned for you today, but before we get into it, I'm going to set the stage and talk a little bit about how we conducted our survey. Retail media will be the fastest growing ad channel in the US in 2024, rising 26% to reach nearly $55 billion in ad spend, according to an eMarketer forecast. By 2027, that number will exceed $100 billion. Though on-site search and display remain retail media's bread and butter, off-site advertising will lead the next evolution due to its ability to expand advertisers' reach and achieve upper funnel goals like increasing brand awareness. eMarketer forecasts off-site retail media ad spend in the US will grow by 61.5% in 2024. In 2027, off-site ads will account for $1 in $5 spent in retail media in the US. To take advantage of off-site's growth, advertisers need to understand where off-site fits into the larger retail media picture and how it can complement on-site advertising to accomplish both brand building and performance marketing goals. They will also need to refine their off-site strategy and identify the channels, tactics, and partners that can elevate campaign effectiveness. That's where the Retail Media Perception Survey, designed by TripleLift and executed by eMarketer, entered the picture. We wanted to find out how advertisers and retailers were thinking about off-site retail media opportunities and where challenges with the channel existed. We surveyed 327 respondents who were either brands, advertisers, or retailers. The survey of 18 questions was developed by TripleLift and executed by eMarketer in November and December 2023. Let's dig into those results. Bob and Mark, it's so great to have you in studio with us today. Now, you guys have a little bit of history, right?
We do. Mark and I worked together at Amazon for quite a while, actually shared an office. So good to see you again, buddy.
It was a load of fun. Yeah.
All right, let's dig into it. The first question, how do you use on-site and off-site when planning your retail media campaigns? Mark, let's start with you.
Yeah, so we don't plan off-site and on-site. We really, our goal, or what we focus on with our clients, is how do we grow their sales, right? And to do that, we have two themes, and it's important to think in terms of retail and media. These themes start with, first, are you retail ready? And this is something that online marketers have been doing forever. Back in our day when we were early, 2012, 2011 at Amazon, we were really focused on retail readiness, making sure your product's in stock, making sure that it's priced properly, that the content is optimal. And probably most important, making sure that you're winning search, meaning that if you run an ad and you get a consumer to search for your product, the worst thing that could happen is you spend all that money, they search for your product, and when they do, they find your competitor. So it's really important to make sure on the retail side that you've got the right path. And these, like I said, we've been doing this forever because even before retail media was a thing, we were doing this in the ad network days where we made sure that the conversion path was optimal. The second piece on the media side is making sure that you are evaluating and planning different types of placements and different types of channels appropriately. So you need to think in terms of effectiveness and attribution, and using tools like clean rooms to really understand what is the true impact of that. The fact of the matter is, when you buy a search ad, the consumer's probably going to convert relatively quickly after clicking on that. If you are running a television ad or a display ad, it may take a bit more time. And you have to consider that in your attribution analysis and how you evaluate results, because if you don't, you'll make a lot of wrong decisions. So basically, in summary, it's everything from having the retail side ready and then having the media side ready and really understanding how to evaluate it makes an optimal campaign.
It's a good point, Mark. I think back to what you just said, that retail readiness that we were talking about in 2011 and 2012 is still relevant today. And the reason for that is those are durable things that matter in every one of these customers' campaigns, whether it's price or availability, selection, star ratings, etc. All those elements need to come through from the retail side to the media side, like you said, and into the creative, really driving not only effectiveness on-site, but also thinking about those same characteristics off-site as well. So when you're planning campaigns, whether it be on-site or off-site, it's important that those durable components to what matters most for those brands and for those customers are being pulled all the way through. And we're fortunate at TripleLift to have a lot of creative tech that allows us to do that.
So being retail and media ready and making sure that all the components are playing together nicely. Our survey found that 90% of advertisers who currently activate retail media programmatic campaigns plan to continue to do so in the next 12 months. What do you think makes a successful retail media campaign? Mark, to you first.
Well, I already talked about the retail readiness. So let's focus a little bit on the offsite, since that's what we're here for. We really focus on, are you running in the right place, okay? And are you running on the right sites? Or if you're running video, are you running on the right channels and things like that? I'll go again to the old days when there were cookies everywhere, and you used to be able to, you would just run a broad display campaign and really hope to just drop pixels in as many places as you could, because you'd win attribution. You had no idea, to be honest with you, and I questioned the first 10 to 15 years of my career, you had no idea if it was really working. You just knew you were getting credit, right? And the winners in those games were the ones who could really drop a lot of cookies all over the place. In retail media, which we also think of as closed loop media, you have just an unbelievable ability to understand at a very granular level what's really happening. But that also means you have to, you can prove out what really works. So for example, we've run campaigns and really looked into the details and learned that, the premium sites and sites that are more expensive, tier 1 sites, perform much better and drive much better performance than longer tail or made for advertising type sites. If you think sometimes you look up a recipe, for example, and you go to a site and all you're seeing is ads, you can't even see some of the ingredients that you want. Those sites are simply made to show ads and to drop cookies. So when we did this study and we looked broadly around everything, we learned that literally thousands of sites weren't driving any conversions, weren't driving any results. But when we really got down to it, the sites that were actually more expensive, they may have cost almost twice as much, but they drove more than 2 times the number of sales, the amount of sales, and the amount of detail page views, which is considering the product and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great point. We think a lot about that at TripleLift. As an SSP who cares a lot about our publishers and having the right publishers and premium publishers in place, making sure that we're working with exactly the publishers that are driving conversions, whatever that may mean, whatever outcomes, whether in the case of retail media, that is detail page views or conversions, or for non-retail media, other outcomes like cost per acquisition, et cetera. We find exactly the same thing, that there are a number, thousands of made-for-advertiser sites that often do not drive any conversion at all. And we spend a lot of time making sure that our network and our SSP is built in a way that drives the outcomes for our users. And the way I've often thought about this, going all the way back to the old days, I feel like the old world, is when you're on site, you can create a perfect experience that converts the folks who are there in the store at the moment, but you are beholden to the amount of folks who are in that store. In the case of off-site media or third-party media in a retail media environment, it really matters that you're finding the old saying of like the right person in the right context at the right time, because I see that as kind of filling a bus filled with relevant and potential customers, of new customers in some cases to the brand, and driving them back to that storefront for conversion. So that's really the way I see the job of third-party media and how you should be thinking about it. is that it is that bus that is driving potential customers back to your pages, and then that retail readiness on site matters so much.
And speaking about success and satisfaction, our findings from our survey found that advertisers rank their satisfaction with offsite at an average of 6.8 out of 10. From your perspective, what are the greatest challenges with offsite today, and where are there areas for improvement? And Bob, let's start with you.
Yeah. We were talking about it earlier off camera, but there are 100 plus retail media networks now. We were joking, but it's true that my favorite convenience store, Wawa, now has its own retail media network. And I love that as a guy from New Jersey. But when you think about that, just a small fraction of those retail media networks actually have third-party supply that's helping drive and be that bus to drive people back. They're focused largely on their on-site experience and converting folks who are already in the store. So there's a lot of work left to do there, right? Because we've just scratched the surface on the number of retail media networks who are involved in third-party media. There's so many more that can come online, and with that will come innovation. In addition to that, you have third-party companies such as TripleLift who are getting involved to help drive some of that innovation and bring some of that creativity that exists on site with some of these retail media networks into the creative and tech element offsite. And then lastly, I think you touched on cookie bombing earlier. Well, the days of the cookie are quickly vanishing, and we're coming up on there being no cookies available, or very few cookies remaining in the marketplace. And with that, you're going to need a cookieless solution offsite, and you need to make sure that anyone you're working with offsite is bringing great cookieless targeting solutions, which usually has some sort of lookalike model to the table, and can drive awareness and conversion back to the original site. There's a lot of evolution left to do. There's a lot of players left to get in the game, and we're just seeing the very beginning of it. To steal a line from our days at Amazon, it's day one of third-party inventory.
Yeah, and to get a little tactically, first of all, Wawa is from Pennsylvania, but just to be
really
to
You're
get a little
Staten Island.
Yeah, to get a little more tactical, there's two other challenges that we see when you're running campaigns, right? One is frequency, right? How do you know how often to show ads to a consumer? This has been a challenge forever. Again, I'll go back to like our favorite tool in solving all of this, which is clean rooms. You can really understand how often you've shown ads to consumers. What's the optimal frequency? At what point down the, after showing 5, 6, 7 ads to a consumer over a period of time, should you stop, or should you start showing it again? And the second one is attribution, right? So how do I measure and understand the impact of a certain ad? I touched on it earlier around things like video and display, which obviously it takes a little bit longer to see the impact for these types of things, right? Take Super Bowl ads, right? You've got Arnold Schwarzenegger screaming "Neighbor." That doesn't get everybody immediately to go sign up for State Farm, right? But it plants the seed, and maybe 6 months down the road when they're wanting to look at something. So you need to think about attribution windows. You need to understand that, and the tools the retailers are developing give us the ability to do that, and to really take full advantage of this closed loop attribution that they provide.
Now I want to shift a little bit to KPIs and how we're thinking about the things that we should be tracking. 58% of brands and agencies in our survey said offsite is better for upper funnel goals, but the top KPIs that advertisers are optimizing toward include ROAS, CTR, CPC, and online sales. There seems to be a contradiction here between what advertisers say they use offsite for and how they're actually executing on those campaigns, possibly due to the complexities of this fast-growing channel. How do you see offsite fitting into the purchasing funnel? Bob, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. I was at a conference recently, and we were talking about whether there really is such a thing as brand ads and performance ads. I think in reality, all ads are brand ads and performance ads, and have various elements and do different things. So Mark, you touched on it a little bit earlier around your neighbor example, that there are longer sales cycles to certain types of creative, like television. But you look historically at marketing mix models, and you'll see that television has traditionally done particularly well at driving long-term performance when you look at some of those modelings. So you have to be looking at across all sorts of metrics. On-site, when you're looking at search, and Mark, you touched on this a few minutes ago, that when you're that close to the point of purchase, the sales cycle may not be that long. But when you're further away and the consideration cycle is a little bit longer, you have to think a little bit differently about it. It doesn't make it less important. We talked about it earlier, the driving the bus back to the store. That is critical. Otherwise, you're only going to convert the people in the store, and that may not be good enough, especially for mature brands who have already kind of done that work. So thinking about the longer sales cycle, the consideration metrics that come with being off-site is a really important component to thinking holistically and long-term about your business.
Yeah. Well, going back to your question around, is this the way they're evaluating it, is it a contradiction? I don't actually think it is, because I think the purchase funnel is a bit of a myth, right? We've done studies both at Amazon and now at Flywheel where we've tried to see where do consumers go before a purchase, where do they see ads, what type of ads, and the fact of the matter is it's all over the place. So it's really important that you really understand and can evaluate this and really understand the time frame, like I've said before, and use the tools that they're providing. Don't just rely on the reporting that's shown in the UI. Dig deep into the tools like marketing clouds and streaming data that they give through APIs, so you can really evaluate and understand what ads and what channels are driving the performance that you need.
And given the challenges that you guys have mentioned earlier, how do you see third-party partners playing into the retail media ecosystem? More specifically, how do you think retailers could lean on third-party partners to expand offerings for brands and agencies? And Bob, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, sure. Going back to the old days, we internally, these retail media networks, truthfully, they have a lot of competing priorities. Whether you're at Amazon or Walmart or Roundel, wherever it may be, they're all working on a number of things. And that means that engineering resources, product resources are being dispersed to each of those, and may not always be as deep and well-staffed as they'd like to be. Third-party companies, whether it be TripleLift or others, can do a really great job being focused in one very specific area. So in our case, having more than a dozen years of experience as an SSP, we've curated premium publishers that can drive really great results for companies like Flywheel and their customers in a retail media environment. So when I think of third-party partners, I think about the ability to drive very specific and deep knowledge and expertise in a given area. We see it a lot also in like CTV and shoppable CTV and innovative ad formats in those types of arenas. So I just see them as a complement to what the retail media networks, even though we look at them and some of those are big tech and they have a lot of resources, they're never enough, right? And we live that on the other side of the coin. So we're here to help and be a complement to the efforts that they make internally inside their own walls.
Great. We have time for one last question in our section of conversation. And just to our audience, remember, if you have any questions for Bob or for Mark, send them into the chat channel on the right, and we will get to as many as we can. So last up, while retail media is the fastest growing ad channel in the US in 2024, rising 26% to reach nearly $55 billion in ad spend, is it fair to say we've only scratched the surface of this new media landscape? And what does the future of retail media look like to you? Mark, let's start with you.
Yeah, so we love that data. We're really bullish on retail media. We obviously think it's growing. We're investing a lot. I think there's two pieces that really drive the future. One is as the more sophisticated data capabilities you get. I've mentioned clean rooms a number of times. Just gives marketers and their partners a real ability to understand what's really going on, to plan, to really drive their investment and to invest more, right? So there's all the things that I've described that make it really powerful. But on top of that, it's incredibly privacy safe, right? And this world is not going to get less privacy focused. And then it just as each of the retail marketplaces starts to provide more and more data, we can use that data to drive better and better performance. And everyone's learning how to do that. And it's a process. It doesn't just happen overnight. The second piece is AI, because it's a requirement to say AI in every webinar. I'm saying AI. And it's just really, it's driving a lot of change both from the consumer experience and from the brand and marketer experience. I mean, on the consumer experience, the things that like Instacart's doing has Ask Instacart. They've had that for a while, where you can simply type in, hey, I'm having a barbecue tomorrow, what should I get? And they'll create your list. Or I want to make chili, and it'll give you the recipe and the list of what you need to buy. Really powerful stuff. Amazon just is starting to test into things like that. They just announced a project called Rufus that is around that. And then on the brand and partner side, we're using AI to do everything. I mean, we've always used AI and machine learning to optimize campaigns. That's not new. And if anyone tells you it's new, it's not. But the AI generated content. So now you can literally generate content on your product detail pages, not just on one retailer, but on literally tens or hundreds of retailers, which used to take a lot of work to do. Now you can do that primarily using AI. And secondly, with images, right? There's a lot of AI enabled imaging partners and capabilities and technology that allow you to create everything from videos to just static images, which if you're a third-party seller and you don't have the access to actors and things like that, you can create some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, thanks for talking about AI. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Covered it.
That's why I'm here.
That is why you're here. So we look at it from the data side as well, right? So we are about to see cookie deprecation happen in 2024. It's real. It's happening. It's not gonna get pushed out again, most likely. And having strong solutions, you touched on clean rooms, cookieless solutions that can drive real meaningful outcomes for brands and customers are going to be table stakes in just a few months. And using eMarketer data, it's been quite clear that not everybody's thinking about that yet. And we're only a few months away. And I think the data was something like 70+% of most brands are not yet really diving in to cookieless solutions, but they need to, and they need to think about it now, because when the light switch goes off in just a few months, they need to have a meaningful and useful solution in place. So when I think about the growth is absolutely going to continue to occur. We talked, as I touched on earlier, the notion of both brand and performance ads, they're kind of the same thing, and retail media blends them more than any other. So we'll see that growth in retail media continue to be doubled down on, and then the need for things like smart data and AI and good creative tech will go a long way to driving that success and that growth in the foreseeable future.
Great. Thank you for sharing all that information and the great data. And if there's one image I can leave everyone with, it's we need to fill the bus with new people and drive the bus with the people to the store.
That's right.
Bob and Mark, we've got some questions from the audience, so let's get straight into Q&A. Mark, we'll start with this one for you, I think. Where are you seeing retail media budgets coming from that are driving growth?
Yeah, we're seeing it come from a number of places and pretty much everywhere you could see it. First of all, it grows organically. Right? I've seen, this stuff works. So when your marketing budgets work, marketers and CMOs and CFOs can allocate more budget. So that's one place. We're also seeing it come from other digital sources, right? Brands are reallocating budget from other digital channels that they've invested in and moving it towards retail media. And then lastly, people have been investing with consumer products brands have been investing with retailers forever. And it's called things like merchandising spending and that's what, when Pepsi's at the end of an end cap, that isn't just because everybody loves Pepsi, they're paying to be there, right? So brands are moving some of that type of spending into retail media and investing there. So it's really coming from a number of different places.
Yeah, I'd second that. The proof of performance notion of retail media has really driven so much of the investment from other places. It's not to say that other types and formats of advertising aren't performant, but the ability to prove it out and report on it and hand back to a CMO exactly the results is really powerful. The old saying of I don't know which half of my advertising works, right? Is kind of gone away in a retail media space, because you actually can determine. You have to figure out what worked means, but you absolutely can see it.
And we have a question from our audience, and they're asking about pushback. So they say, broader question, but what do you say to brands that push back on offsite DSP ads because they're afraid these ads will pull revenue away from their D2C site?
I think that's a myth because, A, just to be frank, click-through rates on display ads are so low that the only way the consumer is going to really, go to a site that they weren't normally going to buy the product at is if they click through the ad and it sends you to a certain place. So think in terms of, generally the consumer is going to buy the product where they're going to buy it anyway, right? So when you show an ad, you put your brand in front of them. If they were going to buy it at your DTC site, they're going to buy it there. If they were going to buy it on a retailer, they were going to buy it there anyway. Just worry about growing your overall brand and thinking about where, and that's really your big challenge. And then but if you're worried about your DTC site, make it really powerful, make it really strong, and make sure that your ads talk about that site. And then I think you'll find consumers will go there.
Yeah, I think about it in terms of the point of least friction, right? So to Mark's point, if you're driving folks to the sites they go to organically, whether that be a Walmart or an Amazon or a Target, let that be the path of least resistance. Take them there, right? As opposed to trying to force them to a different site that they're not a customer used to going to. It's going to feel off. And we used to talk about this all the time, is that the path to conversion is the one with the fewest clicks, with the fewest steps along the journey. And if you're pointing people to a place they're not used to going, you may be adding another destination or stop before the destination. And I think you should just make it as easy as possible.
So you're saying don't stop the bus on Wawa on the way to the retailer.
That's right. You just got to keep going. You got to power them through right to where they would
get where they're going to be. Yeah.
Here's a question about privacy, which I know everyone is thinking about right now. What makes retail media more privacy safe than traditional third-party vendors?
I'll leave it to you.
Oh yeah, thanks so much. So there's closed loop attribution in the world of retail media, and so they're not sharing your data anywhere else, right? It's when you have a site that, in the cases of the Walmarts and Amazons of the world, have hundreds of millions of people's not only credit card information but also home addresses, privacy is of the utmost importance. So going back to what we were just talking about, like, you want to be working with those retail media networks that drive trust and privacy with the customers that they work with. So you're shopping on Amazon because you trust it. You're shopping on Walmart because you trust it. And they never want to jeopardize that. The amount of work that goes into maintaining your trust is critical. And in the case of these really large retail media networks, there's a lot of eyeballs on them from the government. And they need to make sure that they are delivering against that and not doing anything that would jeopardize people's personal identifiable information.
We're getting a lot of questions about data and measurement, as I'm sure you could imagine. One of the questions is, how do you measure the return? What types of data are retailers giving to be able to plan future campaigns?
Yeah, I'll take that. I talked a lot about sophisticated data and clean rooms and things like that. What we're able to look in there is everything from the impression and the click, and that someone actually bought your product, but it also goes further down to how much the product costs, so you can calculate return. And then you can see what that consumer, within that privacy-friendly clean room, you can see what that consumer goes on to purchase again and again. And that, I think, is the most important part. That's where we're finding our clients are really interested in both repeat purchase, and are they subscribing, for example, to get the product delivered to them regularly, or at the beginning of that, is it new to brand? Is it the first time they've bought that product in a period of time, maybe in a year or 2 years, which is really what consumer product brands are really care about. They want to make sure they're getting new customers, and they want to make sure they're getting repeat purchases. And the only way to really look at that, it's very hard to display that in a UI in a really actionable way, is to really get into the detail, get into the data, use those tools to determine where to invest and how to use it.
I wouldn't add anything to that.
Another cookie question. How are you going to use first-party CRM data for offsite targeting post-cookies?
Well, I think that what they mean is with a brand can bring their own data, their own consumer data. It tends to be emails, hashed emails, right? So it's somewhat privacy protected. They can inject that into retail media marketplaces so that they can then use that for targeting on Amazon or with Walmart or with others. So that's the primary way that it's used. And it's really valuable because both you can message those consumers differently. If you know someone's already interested in your product, you can message them. Or if you know they already buy your product, maybe you don't need to market to them in the way you're marketing to people who haven't bought your product. So you can exclude those consumers because they're already buying your product either through another channel, or they're already regular buyers interested.
Yeah, first-party data is going to be king in a cookieless world, and we are closely upon that time. So you're exactly right. For brands that have robust CRMs with great user data, that's going to be really powerful for them. For the ones that don't, there are cookieless solutions in market that will be able to use first-party data signals from publishers. And we have a first-party cookieless solution at TripleLift that does exactly that. So there are some brands that have really great data, and there are some that may not own the point of conversion and therefore may have less powerful data. So there's going to be options for them, but all of them are going to be first-party in nature. It's just a matter of which first-party you're referring to.
I think this one might have to do with Chase's news earlier about non-retail media networks. So can you speak about these non-retail media networks and what that means for the space? I see the benefits for advertisers leveraging that first-party data, but are consumers happy to have their banks or their financial institutions advertise to them?
It's an interesting one. I don't want to speak for the customer on this one, and I think it'll vary, right? Like, I think there should be, in any one of these cases, there should be an opt-in and not an opt-out. And if Chase is going to build a non-retail media network, they need to think long and hard about how to do that in a privacy compliant way. They have some of the most sensitive data that you can have on a person, right? You have bank account information, investment information, home address, etc. There's a lot of things that are very sensitive in nature. So I'm sure they're thinking through that, and they'll want to be overly reliant on privacy compliance here and double down there. So again, I won't speak for customers and what they do and don't want, but they should just make sure that they tread carefully.
I think you're right, but remember, think of it as like retail media is the name we're using, but it's closed loop media, right? So the one I'm most interested, like United Airlines recently announced they're doing a retail media or a closed, and that's interesting. Travel is, I interact with United in a number of different ways, and them understanding what I'm doing, where I'm going, things like that, will help them to provide me and consumers and brands with just better offers and better solutions, and we'll learn. And I think that we're all in a journey here. You said it before, we're day one. We're all learning all these, some of these things will fail and some of them will succeed, and we'll learn where we end up.
So this question is about the open web. So per the IAB, 80% of the open web doesn't have any consumer data to match to it, whether that's using an ID or a clean room. So this watcher wants to know, how do you expect this offsite data to scale post-cookie when the entire industry of marketers and retail media networks are competing for a limited 1/5 of the internet supply?
I mean, if you go back to the data that I shared, and it's a case study we have on the Flywheel website, where we looked at all of the inventory we could run on. We ran campaigns across everything and identified the best performing. We came to the conclusion that the really premium sites, the sites that people go to regularly, are the most performant. And they might be the most expensive, but they drive the best performance because that's where users are engaged. So when you think about the 80% of the internet that isn't, there's a really good chance that a lot of that is not valuable, may not actually even really be happening due to bots and things like that. And I think if we focus on premium inventory and premium sites and evaluate performance in that way, you'll be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and candidly, they're including TripleLift, a lot of cookieless solutions now being released in the market that are using contextual signals and lookalike modeling in conjunction with each other to build reasonable, privacy-safe targeting solutions that even in those places where there may not be a signal, we can build lookalike models that are able to scale across the open web in a way that will provide meaningful outcomes for customers. So tune in if you want to learn more at TripleLift, but the truth is that there's a lot of work being done on the back end to account for that.
And we have time for just one more question, and that's going to be, what is the greatest challenge or limitation you believe brands face with offsite advertising? And Bob, I'm going to pose that one to you.
Yeah, in terms of challenges, we talked about it a little bit, but we're just getting started on this, right? So a lot of these brands are, especially the ones that are not as mature as the ones you'd find at maybe a major holding company, they're just getting started on this. They're just trying to figure out how to work in a retail media environment. It's really important that they plug into the Flywheels of the world to get educated on how to do this. Because it's not just, as Mark talked about earlier, an on-site conversion game. It's really about understanding the entire journey from first impression all the way to conversion, on-site and off-site, how to utilize all those components. So I'd say that those are some of the challenges that that folks are facing, and they need to think long and hard about, is to lean into the experts in the room to help them understand how to do this, because there are brands who have done this before them and they can learn from it. So they should definitely lean in and understand that offsite and the metrics that you'd think about in an offsite environment are going to be different than what you will want to focus on onsite, but they're both equally important. You need the bus to fill the store.
Bob and Mark, thank you so much for all the great content and for answering all of our questions from our audience. We really appreciate it. Before we wrap up, let me take a moment to tell you about eMarketer's media channels. Mark your calendar for Friday, May 3rd for our half-day live virtual summit from exclusive analyst-led sessions on thriving post-cookie, mastering retail media networks, leveraging AI in marketing, and more. Registration is open on our events page, emarketer.com/events. While you're on that events page, you can also register for upcoming live analyst and tech talk webinars. On the audio side of the house, don't forget to tune into Behind the Numbers, eMarketer's daily podcast. And finally, please check out our newsletters. Thank you all for your time, and thanks again to Bob and Mark, the team at TripleLift, and our eMarketer studio team behind the scenes for making today's webinar possible. We'll see you all on the next Tech Talk.